Yep, we can see you, Vinny.
Okay, awesome. Hi, everybody. Thanks for the time today. Hopefully, I can bring the value to. So just a little bit of a quick intro on me. I have been in marketing and in a variety of marketing roles for 10 plus years. In every single one of my roles, the thing I kind of bring to the table is demystifying technology for marketers and the business and technical folks that I kind of bridge the gap for. And so in my endeavors across these 10 years, I've come across a lot of challenges, both technical and operational. And I wanted to share one of those with you today. Now, the presentation that I'm about to share with you is sort of a redux of a presentation that I did recently. But I wanted to present this specific portion of the presentation, particularly because data is at the center of marketing, right? And it's usually the thing that gives us the most headaches. It's usually the things that cause the most problems from a business intelligence perspective, from a analytics perspective, from a processing perspective. And there are some simple things that you can do and some simple tools that you can implement that might be able to help you wrangle this problem, at least to a certain degree. Okay. So let me just jump right into that. So let's talk about standardizing data within your marketing automation platform. First, I think it's always helpful to understand really what the problem is, to make sure we're all on the same page, as we try to digest all of this information. So number one is, validation, data validation. It doesn't always work the way we intend to, particularly in Marketo, right? Where there could be potential timing issues, or where there's users involved, or collecting contact information from a variety of sources and all that jazz. Your validation rules, things that control the cleanliness of your data, they don't always work as intended, right? And that's because data comes from lots of different sources. Like I said, you can get these things from, imported files, you can get them from purchased sources, users that come to your website and fill out a form, other applications, and all of these different sources, they work and they're managed in different ways, and they have different sorts of priority and urgency within your organization. And the other thing that you have to factor in is sort of the human element, right? Like, people who acquire data and who add data into your systems, they're not always the best data stewards, right? One of the things that I tended to notice is the more my role focused on operations, the more I really and truly cared about the quality of the data that was flowing through those systems. Whereas the more removed I was from it, the less that sort of came to mind. It's not that I didn't care, it's just that it was less of something that came top to mind for me, right? And so that's just standard human behavior, right? And it's probably something that you deal with all the time. Nevertheless, it's going to affect the quality of your data. And then, the bottom line to all this is that data standardization and the lack thereof is going to make it really hard to use your data for lead routing, for analysis and reporting purposes, for scoring, for targeting and segmentation, right? So the more you can, implement processes that you can control and that you can monitor and adjust on your own for standardizing your data, the better off you're going to be in all of these areas, right? So now that we understand sort of the key problem, some of the primary impacts that you're likely facing if you have data standardization issues, I want to share with you how I've broken down this problem in the past and how you might want to look at it through these different lenses. So I break this problem down three ways when I try to think of a solution to it. One is within the map, right? Within the marketing automation platform. And that a lot of times when you're trying to implement solutions with regards to data, with regards to processing, et cetera, you go to what you know, right? And so your marketing automation platform, a lot of times people start there. You put in new flows, you put in new triggers, you put in new filters, you create some campaign and a waterfall flow or something of that nature, because you're comfortable with the system. You have it, you're already paying for it. It doesn't require any additional investment. And it's something that everyone knows how to use, right? You don't really have to ask a lot of permission either. So there's a very low lift. But one of the things you'll see, when I start talking about possible solutions in that space, is that you tend to hit a wall pretty quickly there. And when you hit that wall, what are some other options that you have? Well, one of the other options you might have is offloading processing. Okay, this is super useful because in a lot of cases, you have to do things outside of a system that you're comfortable with, not just because the system is limited, but because doing what you're trying to do is kind of hacky, like it just doesn't feel right. The system wasn't built for that sort of thing, and it could potentially cause performance issues, right? So, I mean, just think if you have a 150 step, flow in Marketo that tries to standardize your country field and the values therein, right? That's kind of a heavy load on Marketo, especially when you've imported, 3, 4, 5, 10,000, 20,000 contacts from a file, and they all have to run through this standardization process, right? So just, consider that. Offloading is another way to kind of think about and solution for the problem. The other way to think about it, and this is kind of a more advanced way, but I want to, we're going to discuss it a little bit, and I wanted to put it in your mind in case you encounter this issue, you've tried everything you can, and you're trying to think of a way to express another solution to the technical folks that you potentially have at your disposal to sort of help you solve this problem. And that's pre-map. Pre-map, or pre-marketing automation platform, is implementing some kind of solution that standardizes your data and cleans your data before it even hits your marketing automation platform. Because once it hits your marketing automation platform, pretty much all bets are off. It's going to impact something, whether it's your lifecycle processing, or it could mistakenly go get synced to your CRM, or there's some rogue campaign out there that ignores your processing logic and sends an email based on some attributes that a user has. Like I said, once your map catches it, all bets are off. So you better make sure that anything you put into your map is as clean as possible. So pre-map solutions are really the most advanced and best way to go. They're not necessarily simple, but they are real world. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay, cool. So when we talk about inside of the map type of solutions, we're talking about the things that you probably do every day, right? Creating campaigns or multiple campaigns inside of your marketing automation platform, in this case, Marketo Engaged, dedicated to normalizing all of your imported records, standardizing data, cleaning values, isolating or quarantining those records that don't necessarily seem to fit or that need an additional sort of touch. And the great thing about this, like I said, is there's no additional costs, right? You're already doing this stuff. You don't need to train up to do anything different. One of the other nice things about this is that you have what's called single system containment, right? So in many organizations that have really complex portfolios, a lot of the business logic that's used to standardize data is sort of distributed across multiple systems. That happens kind of organically, it happens over time, but it becomes a real problem because when you have a data issue, whether it's a sync issue or some data that's causing any other kind of error, it's really hard to triage or figure out where that issue is coming from when your logic for processing data is spread across multiple systems. When you have single system containment, you basically have one master system, whether it be a master system for marketing or a master system for the entire organization, that is doing all of that standardization in one place. So if you have a problem, you pretty much have easier traceability of where that issue is going to reside. This is, again, the easiest thing that you are going to configure as well, because it's in a system you're aware of. And then the cool thing about this too is it works with form fills and imports. So basically the data has to come into Marketo first in order for you to act on it. That's a pro, but it's also a con, right? So any data that comes into Marketo, you can work with this, with these kinds of solutions. The problem is you got to capture it first. And in that capturing, there is an inherent risk. Right? The other thing too is, hey, Marketo wasn't made for some of this stuff. Right? Marketo was made to automate your marketing process, right? Your communications, not necessarily to do data standardization, right? So the data standardization transformation capabilities are very limited. In some cases, you might have to do, arithmetic operations. You might have to do, fuzzy matching and searches within text to change it to other text. You might have to deconcatenate certain strings. You just don't have that sort of control inside of Marketo. The other thing too is, some of this stuff works differently when you're doing batch versus when you're doing, transactional type of record changes. And, like I kind of alluded to before, depending on the sophistication of the kind of standardization you're trying to do, you're really leveraging your resources in a platform that's not intended to do this thing that you're trying to do necessarily. So those resources could probably be put to better use. Like if you have a really big email campaign that's going out and you want that process quickly, best to, to dedicate your system resources and your processing power to those kinds of activities, which is what Marketo is made for in the first place. And like I say, it's going to require some cumbersome steps, potentially, depending on the kind of change you want to make. But the cool thing is, once you run into those, and I didn't want to go deeper into that particular solution, because I know that as professional marketing operations folks, all of you have probably been in that place at one point or another in your career, probably many, many times, where you just try to exhaust the options that you have available to you within the platform, and then you kind of feel stuck. And the very next thing that you start thinking about is, man, now I need to go to IT and I got to get somebody involved, and I probably have to do something with APIs, or I got to implement some kind of manual process to do X, Y, and Z. Well, one of the things that you should consider, again, it may involve IT depending on the route you want to go, but is offloading. Right. So the pros of offloading, especially with a platform like Marketo Engage, are that the sky's the limit. Anything you can webhook data into from a transactional perspective, you can do with offloading, right? So anytime a user fills out a form, you can use that as a trigger to send their entire record over to another system to standardize, enrich, and do anything you want to do, and then send that data back into Marketo in a number of ways. There's lots of flexibility there. The only processing you're going to need is that detection for the trigger and that webhook send over to your offloading system. And this kind of thing, once you have it set up, it's super easy to deploy and maintain, particularly if you do this on your own. So for example, if your offloading system is a Zapier, all of the processing can be done in Zapier on a transactional, from a transactional perspective, and then the data can just be sent back into Marketo using their native connectors. So it's not a lot of work necessarily. And the cool thing is you have a lot of control that's still under your command. So if the business logic associated with, maintaining that data, or the business rules associated with standardizing all that data change, it's still under your command. And most of them are going to be in Zapier, as an example. It is low cost, no cost. There's lots of different options out there that don't necessarily break the bank. You don't have to, at this point, for these kinds of solutions, you should not have to, go to a, multi-$1,000 system unless you have, millions of transactions or millions of records at any given time. But if you do, this kind of thing isn't the right solution for you anyway. And you probably have enough governance in your environment where they're probably, your organizational, your IT team is probably going to have you, create something that's a little bit more scalable or governed in the first place, right? Like I said, this is still single system containment of logic. It still works with form fills and imports. But the cons are similar to having data, having all your processing in Marketo. You still got to capture that data somehow, and there is still risk associated with it, right? And so you got to make sure that the trigger to standardize this data is as close as possible to the triggering event, whether it's a form fill or an import or whatever. Make sure that this is happening as soon as possible after that event takes place. Now, some of these options are going to require you to be a little bit more technical. And the one that I want to talk about today is, I think, one that is really, I don't know if it's unknown to the marketing operations community as much as it should be, or if it's just something that's underutilized because people don't know what the capabilities are. But the one that I'm going to share with you today requires some use of light JavaScript. My personal opinion is that folks that are in marketing operations need to be able to at least read JavaScript. It's super powerful and it's a great skill to have. But in doing so, that kind of skill set can transfer over to using this solution as well. The one thing that limits these kinds of offloaded solutions with entry-level tech is that they're not suitable for bulk or batch processing. So if you're doing really large imports, if you have batch campaigns that you're running and you want to run a step like this to clean or standardize data beforehand, probably not the best use of this kind of solution. Okay, but with that, let me go into one of my favorite solutions for standardizing data in a really low cost or no cost way. And that is with a community offering called FlowBoost. So FlowBoost is a way to what FlowBoost does is it extends Marketo's capabilities, not processing, but I say data calculation capabilities. It does that by, basically it's a secure web service that you can webhook commands to, and you can tell it what to do, but you're using JavaScript to do that, light JavaScript. And one of the other cool things that it lets you do is it lets you turn any webhook out of Marketo into an API call into another system. And while that's, kind of an advanced use case, I wanted to mention it here because once you start getting used to a tool like FlowBoost and start syncing into, JavaScript and start recognizing the power of that, I guarantee that's going to be one of the next things that you sort of ask yourself, hey, can I use some JavaScript code to authenticate to Salesforce and make a call to the API, or authenticate to my event management system and make a call to the API and write data or pull data out? Chances are you're going to be able to do that with this off-the-shelf product like FlowBoost. And the great thing about it is that there's a pretty robust community edition out there that gives you 100,000 calls a month. So more than enough for most folks' needs. And if you need more, you can buy it. But what I find is there's ample power there for the community edition, which is free and pretty reliable. So with that said, what are some use cases that you can use FlowBoost for? Well, as you know, data standardization comes in many forms. Standardizing can mean calculating numbers. It can mean deriving attributes so you can enrich, secondary fields. It can mean, proper capitalization of country names, or, using the right abbreviation codes for country names. It can be detecting errors in URLs based on, URLs that to be incorrect. FlowBoost can help you with all this stuff. Right. So to maintain data quality, there are in the documentation for FlowBoost, there's some really neat code templates that let you do things just like this. If you want to standardize to a list of countries, you can do that within a webhook. If you want to try to derive industries or standardize to a list of industries based on what you might find in what a user submitted. If you want to try to derive a user's role based on their title, or an industry based on a company name, right? Sometimes that is possible as well. All of those things are possible with FlowBoost. A couple of other things that you might need to do, and this is, by solving that, data transformation and data standardization problem, and getting acquainted with the power of FlowBoost. Now you can take a next step and sort of look at extending the capabilities of Marketo. So with FlowBoost, you can create a solution, and this is well documented too in the documentation, but you can limit the number of event registrants when a user is filling out a form, so that you can prevent them from filling out a form or change a form out on your website if the number of folks that are registered for an event is already at a max, for example. Right? And there's a whole host, of other solutions here, like looking up values in a CSV that's hosted in Marketo. But you see, once you open the door with the data standardization piece, you open up FlowBoost for a whole bunch of other things. To me, this is probably the best kept secret in marketing operations. Free tool that can help you look like a rock star if only you felt comfortable with just a little bit of JavaScript. I highly recommend this for any marketing operations professional. And it's not just for Marketo. Any system that can webhook out, where you can configure the webhook and can receive a payload back, can leverage FlowBoost. All right, the way FlowBoost works, just a really, really quick, kind of high level on this is, let's say a user, does an interaction, they get an activity in Marketo, you use that as a trigger. You are literally just sending out a webhook. And if you look here, I know it's kind of small, but the payload for that webhook is actually the JavaScript that you want the server to run on your behalf. So the sky's the limit. Right? Anything you can do with JavaScript, you can pretty much do with FlowBoost. There's really, the possibilities are endless. So that's why I love this this great tool. Okay, enough about FlowBoost. So that one is pretty simple. Go check it out today. Just look up FlowBoost on Google and you're all set. The other thing here is, we talked about there being three key areas, key ways or lenses that you want to sort of see this problem through. One is within the map, one is offloading, and then the other one is this pre-map solution. This one happens to be one of my favorites from an architectural perspective. If I'm looking at creating solutions that grow with you, creating durability, and then having a solution that brings marketing closer to IT, sort of establishes a strong partnership. This is one of those kinds of systems, right? It needs to be designed, you need to be smart about it. You have to, kind of build it so that there's shared responsibility for data stewardship. But let's just jump right into it. So the concept here is, instead of submitting data directly into Marketo for any reason, it goes through a different system first. Just as an example, one of the things that you might want to do is have a CDP and submit data into a CDP. Tons of ways to do that, and almost every CDP supports it. And within that CDP, you can process your data and then send only relevant data to your marketing automation platform or your CRM, right? That is an example of a pre-map solution. That one is much more out of the box. It may still require some development work, but far less than something totally custom from the ground up. Right? But the real benefit here, the true benefit, the primary benefit, is that the data that you're getting into your map is processed before it's captured anywhere critical. You can prevent it from replicating and syncing to your downstream systems within your marketing technology portfolio. You can prevent it from going to those places without first being standardized and run through a governance process. Again, here, the possibilities are endless. And one of the neat things that you can do is you can set up a queue so that anything that fails your validation rules, anything that fails to run through your standardization process, gets quarantined, isolated, and queued up so that you can review and create additional rules to handle those scenarios. You don't lose the data. The data is just waiting there for you to tell the system how you want it to handle a new scenario. This is also, by the way, this is one of the other problems that I didn't really go into with the other two solution types, but inherently, when you're doing this kind of data standardization and such, there are going to be a ton of scenarios that you do not account for. Again, the reason being because you have human beings involved in the process, right? Wherever there's a human being involved in the process, there is unpredictability, right? And so you can't possibly account for all of the different scenarios that you're going to face from a standardization perspective. So having a system that's processing data before it goes into your marketing automation platform and being able to set up kind of that fault queue so that you can deal with failed records is a boon to maintaining your data quality. Once again, here you're also offloading most or just about all of your processing. So if you're smart and you keep everything in this pre-processing system, You're not going to be dedicating any data standardization, any performance, any processing power to data standardization in any back office systems, including your marketing automation platform. And then another cool thing is that, and I've seen this issue at some other organizations I've worked with, sometimes there's a desire to send data not only to your marketing automation platform, but also to a different platform at the same exact time. They don't want anything to be held up. They don't want anything to stand in front of it. You want data to go to Marketo, and then you want it also to go to an engine that's sitting behind your software as a service product that you offer. Right? To create accounts, to distribute licenses so that you can send in an email to the client who just registered, right? All of those things are super important in many cases prior to having data sent to the map, or it needs to be sent simultaneously to these other systems. There's no other way to do it than to have something sitting in front of your marketing automation platform. Right? The cons, well, this is why I leave this one for last, because it is going to be higher effort. It is going to be higher cost, and it is going to take a longer time to deliver. But if you do it right, this is the kind of system that can last for years to come. I worked with one organization where we built this, and they're still using it 6 years later. And this is where all of their data is coming into their Marketo instance. Right? One of the other cons too is based on how you implement this operationally, and how you distribute access to your marketing automation platform or to your other back office systems. Users can bypass this with direct imports and that sort of thing. But that's something that you can probably manage just with retraining and monitoring and observation and a good old slap on the wrist. Generally speaking, these kinds of solutions, custom solutions, are going to have some level of dependency on dev expertise. So if you're using a CDP, there's less dev dependency, but to integrate it into all of the sources you want to capture information from, you're probably going to need dev support. If you build this from the ground up, clearly you're going to need dev support for just about everything. The thing you need to keep an eye out for as well is when you start collecting data in this third-party way, where there's something sitting in front of your map, there is potential for you to break some native tracking features. So as an example, in the case of Marketo, let's say you want to have custom forms on your website and you want to send form fills to this collector that you've created, this pre-map collector you've created. Well, when that pre-map collector is done standardizing data and submits that data over to Marketo, you want it to look like a form fill activity. So you need to use the right API. You need to capture the page the user submitted the form on, et cetera. You want to emulate that native capability as much as possible, not work your way around it. And there is some inherent risk with custom solutions in not sort of maintaining that native functionality. So definitely watch out for that sort of stuff if you decide to go down this route. And then finally, there is the potential for multi-system sprawl. Remember, I talked about single system containment for your standardization logic. If you build this, you have to resist the urge or be really disciplined in situations where your pre-map solution let through something that you didn't want it to let through, or that it should not have let through. And then you start putting band-aids into your marketing automation platform to cover that, right? That's only a natural behavior, and it's sort of expected, but you have to be disciplined and make sure that your pre-map system is augmented to handle those new situations as you encounter them. It's okay to put temporary band-aids in your map, but they should not be permanent solutions, because then you have sprawl. You have logic in your pre-map, and now you have logic in your map, and you have logic in all your other systems. That's a bad situation to be in, okay? So discipline, discipline, discipline. This is just an example of how something like this might work, and how you might even be able to build something like this on your own, okay? So take a solution where you have a WordPress website where your domain and your web property is hosted. And within WordPress, you have custom forms from Gravity Forms. Okay, it's a modular extension to WordPress. When those forms are filled out, you can create your own service in something like FlowBoost, right? You can webhook data into FlowBoost, and then FlowBoost can write into an API to Marketo. Not the best solution, but I wanted to put it here just to let you know that is something you can do, like on the cheap. But a couple of other things. I don't know how many of you have worked with Tray or Workato, or have Tray or Workato in-house, but these are called iPaaS systems. They're integration platforms as a service. And over the years, these have become super accessible to more novice users and users that are not necessarily developers, right? To the point where you could potentially build an endpoint where your custom forms can post into, let's say, a Workato flow. That Workato flow can perform some data standardization steps, and then right at the end, post everything into Marketo for you, or send it into a database, or or any other kind of place where you want to log any errors, right? And the functionality here is just insane. You can call other services, third-party services for enrichment. You can pull from your other systems to see if you know any contacts that have submitted a form, and enrich from your own first-party services. You can, standardize your data in a ton of ways. You can, score a person when they come in based on data that you've collected over time. You can look at their activities and calculate a score on the fly. It's pretty amazing, some of the power that you have available with tools like Workato and Tray. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that, is usually reserved for IT teams using Boomi, using MuleSoft, using, Microsoft Azure Functions and Logic apps, okay? Like, this is the kind of stuff you normally go to IT for. And these kinds of platforms are making that more and more accessible to marketing every day. So they can be used for that. And we talk about the things that you can use them for. Once again, you can even use them to sync data not only to Marketo, but simultaneously to other systems in your back office. Right. Now, one of the other things that you can do here as well is, let's say that you have a online product, you have a form that you need people to fill out, and you need to reach out to another service before you send them to your marketing automation platform, because that's going to kick off, that's going to add them to a nurture, and it's immediately going to kick off an email stream, right? You can, let's say, create a user account, get them registered, grab the license from your system, include it in your payload, and write that all back to Marketo Engage. Now, the last thing I'll say about this is, if you think that something like this is just a little over your head, like it's way too much, you do not have to start with something that's just out of this world sophisticated. That's the beauty of this. You can start small, and you can grow, and you can scale it as your knowledge scales. So if you're at a smaller or mid-sized organization where you have the flexibility of kind of approaching this in a piecemeal way and evolving it and growing it over time, I highly recommend learning how to use these systems. The exercise itself in just thinking through the problem and architecting your flow and all that is invaluable knowledge. And it's a training mechanism for using these kinds of tools for other automation that you want to perform in-house. Okay, so just a quick wrap up here for our 3 approaches. 1, you're within the map. Those are solutions that you implement in areas of comfort, right? You're comfortable with the platforms that you're using. You try to jury rig as much as you can, and then you're going to hit your limit at some point. Once you do, explore offloaded solutions. We talked a little bit about Zapier. I also talked about FlowBoost as kind of an undiscovered country there. And then your pre-map, and that's something that's a little bit more involved, but that I challenge every single one of you to undertake, whether through your team or through your own efforts to familiarize yourself with technology that's really just, it's going to be par for the course moving forward. All right. And that's it for this one. Nate, you want to open it up for questions?
Yeah, I think that that you have. Who has? Thanks for the presentation today, Vinny. I think that's really informative. But yeah, does anyone have any questions on use cases or applications? I see we have one comment, Kevin, discussing kind of the challenges that the healthcare industry would face implementing many of these solutions for obvious PII reasons.
Yep. Yeah, it's, you know, regulated industries like healthcare, pharmaceuticals, finance, you know, yes, you are going to run into issues. However, when you start talking about pre-map solutions, those are actually going to help you, right? That's the kind of thing that I think your organization would appreciate, Kev, because what they can do is they can impart any regulatory processing that needs to take place. They can do that before anything hits your systems. So imagine someone who's totally opted out of communications, and yet they come back and they try to come back into your system, and it's going to wreak havoc because you've already deleted them, let's say, from multiple systems. You can implement something that quarantines them so you can handle them in a different way, and you know, and you don't end up getting into trouble, into a place where you can't really trace how that data has synchronized across all systems. The other thing too is when a user, let's say a user submits a form and they give you a preference for wanting to be contacted, but 5 minutes ago they just gave your support team a different preference over the phone. When you're collecting that data in real time, you can synchronize it to all systems in real time. Marketo no longer becomes the bottleneck, right? So again, this is the kind of stuff where in regulated industries, sure, you know, it's going to be a little bit more, the right solution is going to be a little bit more heavy-handed and take a little bit more effort, but with the right planning, it can add a lot more value and reduce your headaches.
Thanks, Vinny.
Sure, man.
I'm going to stop recording